ASUS is a significant company with an extensive website, and you can spend hours looking at, for example, ROG, Republic of Gamers products, or Prime, or TUF. And then there are ZenBooks, and also smartphones. And you might completely miss other sections. In this instance, ProArt, which covers a lot of products. But instead of spending time looking through a website, I thought, much better to get ASUS to simply send me a bunch of ProArt products so I can get up close and personal. Let's start with motherboards. The X670E Wi-Fi model is installed in this Fractal Design North case. Here we have a ProArt B550 creator, no Wi-Fi on this model. And then we have two motherboards which are essentially identical. This is a Z690 creator Wi-Fi, which has been replaced by this Z790 creator Wi-Fi. And I have to confess, looking through the specification, apart from the chipset model, these two look to be pretty much identical. The ProArt B550 Creator is relatively cheap at £290. It supports AMD AM4, i.e. up to Zen 3 processors, has 12 plus 2 50A Dr. Moss VRMs, and PCI Express Gen 4 graphics. It has two Thunderbolt 4 Type-C ports and dual 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, but no Wi-Fi. The ProArt X670E Creator Wi-Fi comes in at £540, and as that name X670 suggests, it supports AMD Zen 4 with the new LGA socket. It has 16 plus 2 70A VRMs and PCI Express Gen 5 graphics. You get 4 M.2 storage slots, 2 USB 4 Type-Cs and dual Ethernet. This time you get 10 gigabit and 2.5 gigabit. The ProArt Z690 Creator Wi-Fi and the ProArt Z790 Creator Wi-Fi each come in at £569. As I say, a straight replacement, although I wouldn't be shocked if you find the Z690 on discount. So taking a closer look at the Z790, we have support for Intel 12th and 13th gen processors with LGA 1700. The VRMs are a 16 plus 1 70A configuration with PCI Express Gen 5 graphics, 4 M.2s, 2 Thunderbolt 4 Type-Cs and dual Ethernet 10 gigabit and 2.5 gigabit. And so we can see that the treatment given to both AMD and Intel in the ProArt range is pretty much identical, very similar specifications. But of course the idea is they're aimed at the same market, it's just a question of whichever processor you fancy. ASUS ProArt has you covered. What makes a ProArt motherboard different to a ROG motherboard, a TUF or a Prime? The answer frankly is that they are black, therefore there's far less emphasis put on the glitz and show, although I must confess I rather like the styling. The layout is entirely familiar if you have used an ASUS motherboard in the past. Everything's in a logical place, even things like the graphics card release is a sort of feature we've seen recently on ROG motherboards. Probably the biggest single difference between ProArt and non-ProArt motherboards is you get a longer warranty. All ASUS motherboards come with a 3-year warranty. If you register your ProArt board, you get an extra 2 years, so in total 5 years of warranty. In addition, when you register your ProArt motherboard or other ProArt products, you get a 3-month subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud. The first of our 3 monitors is this PA348CGV, and I'm reading the model code off the color calibration sheet that comes with each monitor from ASUS. You also get some documentation, welcome to your ProArt product, and here's your membership notice. The stand has swivel, height adjustment and tilt. It does not have pivot, but you're not surprised to hear that, I imagine, because it's so wide that in order to pivot 90 degrees it would have to raise up like yay high, which would be a huge amount of adjustment. It's a 34-inch monitor with a resolution of 3440 by 1440. That's a 21:9 aspect ratio, an IPS panel with 10-bit colour, and 120Hz refresh, 1000:1 contrast, and 400 nits of peak brightness, 350 nits of typical brightness. It supports HDR10 and a number of colour profiles, including Rec 709. For connectivity, we have two HDMI 2.0s, one DisplayPort 1.4 and one USB Type-C which supports DisplayPort Alt mode. You also get a USB hub with 4 USB 3.2 Type-A ports. To make changes with your settings of the PA348 CGV, use this little joystick here, and you can see here we have a series of hardware buttons which are mapped to these little icons. So for example, brightness. There we go, and you can see we're currently only on half brightness. Let's bump it up all the way to 100%, which actually looks rather pleasant to the eye, but is quite a shock to the camera. Back down to 50. Also presets. And there you can see we have a variety of modes. Standard mode, sRGB, we're currently on Rec 709, and you can also go for DCI P3. This is a ProArt product, so you don't get modes such as movie. In addition to the stand that you can see, you also get this alternate base which will clamp to your tabletop. Unscrew like so, slide it on, clamp it up tight, and simply plug the monitor on there. And that gives the clue to the intended market for this monitor, which is universities and other institutions of education. In other words, it's to replace two conventional monitors with one ultra-wide wide aspect. Price is £799, and in essence the technology in this monitor is quite conventional. The brightness and the panel technology, they're entirely within normal bounds. It's a monitor intended to bring convenience to institutions at a reasonable price. If you spend a penny under £1,200, you will get this PA32UCRK. The K is significant because it basically means this. In addition to a handful of cables, you're welcome to your ProArt display paperwork, and also a handful of calibration sheets. A number of calibration sheets, in fact. As mentioned, you get this. I'll come back to the monitor momentarily because it's rather impressive. Let's just get this calibration device out of the way. As you can see, it is labelled as an ASUS ProArt i1 Display Pro by X-Rite. Things are slightly complicated with the X-Rite products because they've hived them off into a separate company called Calibrite. You can indeed buy a Calibrite Display Pro, but if you get it, you get a bundle which includes this color checker passport. This happens to be my own color checker. Nifty little device. In essence, it's used for things like white balance and checking that your camera looks good under whatever lights you're using. This cost me £100 as I recall. They're expensive. So this device is in the order of £150. And in essence, and I'm doing it very short indeed, it's a webcam with a USB connection that connects to some software. Calibrite shows you how to use this device to calibrate your monitor. So the monitor is received calibrated, and then you can check it periodically to make sure it's still functioning as you would desire. So this is a £1,200 monitor. This device is in the territory of £150. Were you to buy the non-ASUS device on its own and you want to get it with the color checker, you're paying £240 or so. So it's a significant part of the price of the monitor. The PA32UCR, whether or not it has the K suffix for the color checker, is interesting. It is the ASUS ProArt entry model into the mini LCD panel range, and this particular version has a 4K, so 3840 by 2160 resolution, so that's 16:9, 32 inches on the diagonal. It's an IPS panel with mini LEDs and a 10-bit display. Refresh is 60 Hz. The contrast is a mighty 1,000,000:1. Peak brightness is 1000 nits, but your typical operating brightness is 400 nits. And it has full color profiles, Adobe RGB, DCI P3. Connectivity, you get 3 HDMI 2.0s, 1 DisplayPort 1.2. Remember, It's got a low refresh and a USB-C that supports DisplayPort Alt mode. You also get a USB hub. The stand has height adjustment, swivel, tilt, and also pivot. The PA32UCR is quite a deep monitor and has this curved back panel. The OSD is controlled by this set of 6 hardware buttons here on the back, and also there's a little joystick, so you'll be navigating this hardware while it is out of sight. As you can see, you have to reach around the back. In essence, these icons are mapped to the buttons that are behind. You can see the brightness is currently set to 60%. Using the little joystick, we can go up all the way to 100, which is slightly brighter than you might like, but this is not an especially bright monitor. The colours look really good. Let's take it back down again to give you a better view. Like so. Within the OSD we can adjust brightness, contrast, saturation, hue, colour temp exactly as you'd expect. But once you've set your colour profile, in this case Rec 709, and you're happy it's correctly calibrated, it's probably best not to tamper. The key takeaway points for me with the PA32UCRK are that it supports 4K 60 with a decent array of inputs. The refresh obviously not for gamers, it's a pro device. The colours look absolutely superb. The contrast ratio is high enough. The price is very reasonable when you consider it includes hardware calibration for those colour profiles. Overall, an impressive monitor. With our third and final monitor, the ProArt Display OLED PA32DC, I have a question for you. In a world where you can buy an OLED TV for £1,000 and you can buy a good OLED TV for less than £2,000, would you consider spending £3,700 on an OLED monitor for your PC? ASUS thinks you are potentially in that market, and part of the explanation is this. This monitor has a built-in hardware calibration device. To calibrate the monitor is a 30-minute process using the software that ASUS supplies. So I've done some B-roll just to show you the little flippy outy thing on the top doing its thing. And if you know anything at all about calibration, you'll be shocked to see me doing this under studio lights, i.e. it's just for B-roll. Do not please calibrate your monitor under lights such as these. ASUS has done a little promo video that shows the features of the monitor, including the hardware calibration device, and it looks really nifty the way they've done it. So you might think the question has now become, what value do you put on this hardware calibration device? £1,000, £2,000, even £3,000? In which case obviously the monitor itself is relatively cheap. In fact, that is not the question ASUS is posing. What they're asking is, are you in the market for a Sony TriMaster BVM HX310? You may have never heard of this monitor. The fact is that monitor is £25,000 plus VAT, and ASUS thinks this monitor can go directly head to head with that product. And clearly the cost saving there is absolutely huge. Indeed, the cost of this monitor is less than the VAT on that Sony. It has to be said they are not a direct competitor to each other. The Sony, for example, includes SDI and Ethernet, which you don't get with the ASUS. But if you've never heard of SDI, it's a camera connection, or you don't want Ethernet on your monitor, then perhaps this is starting to look rather more promising. Sadly, ASUS did not see fit to send me the £25,000 plus VAT Sony for direct comparison, so we can't go down that road. So let's instead dig into the specification of the PA32DC. The panel measures 31.5 inches on the diagonal, resolution is 3840 by 2160, i.e. 4K, and that's a 16:10 ratio. It's an OLED panel, as the name suggests, 10-bit and 60Hz refresh. The contrast ratio is rated at 1,000,000:1, peak brightness is 500 nits, typical brightness 250 nits. I must confess, to my eye it actually looks brighter than that. It supports HDR10 and 99% Adobe RGB and DCI P3. It has 3 HDMI 2.0s, one DisplayPort 1.4 and a USB-C that supports DisplayPort Alt mode. There's a USB hub with 4 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports. The stand supports all the adjustments you want, so you've got height adjustment, swivel, tilt, and pivot. If you don't want all those options with the stand, you can remove it and simply mount the monitor on these supplied feet, which would make it look somewhat like, oh yes, I see. You can also install this shade around the monitor to reduce external light getting to the screen. So these are the side pieces, and this is the top, which has a flip out section to accommodate the hardware calibration device. Having said all that, it is clear the main feature of the OLED PA32DC is the colour profiles that it can represent, including HDR. The gamut is absolutely excellent. It even makes me look lovely. A truly impressive monitor. Yes, it's expensive, but we are fighting here in a field of monitors that go up to £30,000, which is a truly mind-boggling concept. This monitor, I like a great deal. So that was a whistle-stop tour of 4 ProArt motherboards and 3 ProArt displays with a wide range of prices and features, and each aimed at quite specific markets. The OLED is my personal favourite.